Welcome back, everybody, to lesson 1 of Amy. We're going to start by cutting out your blocks. If you haven't done that already, let me refresh your memory as to the sizes. Size 1 to 2, you're going to need a 40 to 42 inch wide piece of fabric by 24 inches long. Size 3 or 4, 44 inches wide, 25 inches long. Size 5 to 6, 44 inches wide, 26 to 27 inches long. Size 7 to 8, 44 inches wide to 28 to 30 inches long. This is just a guide. If you have a particularly tall child, you will need to adjust those. And as I said, when they went from the old very short pattern to the newer pattern, they did not change the yardages. However, the size 1, which is very short, only it has a very generous hem of 4 inches, which in my estimation is a little much for a 1-year-old. But anyway, it's just something to be aware of and to look at. So when this pattern was written, it was written for picking up dots, and so they asked you to cut out your pattern, your block piece, and by the way, you need 2 of your block pieces, one front, one back, they're the same. But at any rate, they asked you to cut this out. We are not going to cut this out because it's much easier to put through the pleater when it is a square rather than a curve. If you've ever tried to put a curve like that through the pleater, it's kind of wonky because you're dealing with bias and the curve, and it's just kind of a little bit more difficult. All right, so before you cut your block out, I would like you to check your pattern for the possible irregularity that I mentioned in the previous video. So apparently some of the patterns are designed like this, where you smock to a straight, a vertical line, and the underarm is left unsmocked. That's the way that I've always done it, but apparently there are versions that are smocked all the way to the side seam, which requires more fabric, and so this curve is elongated. If you use that elongated curve and you only smock to here, then it's not going to fit your linings. So this is how we need to check for this. And the reverse is true. I know they also had one pattern where they asked you to smock to the underarm, but the piece they gave you was did not allow for that. So, all right, so to check for this is how you need to do it. You need to take your front yoke piece and fold it on the seam line, which it has a 1/2 inch seam, and then match it up to the seam line here. And I usually just put a little piece of tape there to hold it. Then take your front lining and lay it on top. Now you can see mine fits perfectly. If your pattern has the issue of having the elongated armhole for smocking, it's not going, you'll see that it doesn't fit. So however you want to adjust that, if it's incorrect, go ahead and do it. The way I'm going to teach this is smocked to the line. If you feel that you absolutely must smock it all the way over, you'll have to elongate this piece probably by 1 inch or so. More is better because you can cut it off if you have to, but it's much easier to do it this way because then you don't have to worry about having smocking in your curve or smocking to the curve and trying to line up your smocking rows to that. Excuse me. Okay, so now that you've done that, and you know, and if the front is correct, the back will be correct too. So now that you've done that, and you cut out your block, you're going to need to mark that fabric so that after it's pleated and smocked, you will know where to cut out the armhole. And in order to smock, you will know where this line is. So I am using this pretty little, let me get this in order here. I'm using this aqua fabric. And what I'm going to do is, you can do it two ways. You can use your pattern piece, or you can use the armhole guide that I sent you by email. I just made these from my patterns. So we're going to lie this on the corner, or lay this on the corner like this. All right. And where is my pen? That's interesting. I'll use a pencil. I had a friction pen here, but I'm not sure where it went. Anyway, so it's labeled with the top and the side so that you don't get it incorrect, and you're going to just draw in your armhole curve. It's not a very good job, but you'll get the idea. Okay. And then you want to draw in this vertical line. And if I were you, I would use either a friction pen or a water-soluble marker. And what I do is just draw that little line, draw a dot at the bottom of the line. Take your ruler, and this line goes to 1/4 of an inch, which is your seam allowance. All right, now you need this before you pleat, because you're going to pull your pleating threads back to this point. Okay? Now I'm going to mark the other side in the same fashion. I have to flip my guide over. And I can see my line there. Whoops, sorry, I've got out of frame there for a second. I'm doing the exact same thing because then I want to pleat it for you. Okay, I decided to use this rather plain fabric so that I thought it would make it less distracting and you'd be able to see what I was doing better. Okay, so that's all you need. You're going to do that front and back. And then you're going to thread up your pleater and you're going to pleat. So I did also send you the number of rows to be pleated for each size, so you can look at that as a reference. As I said in my email, I think for this dress that less is more. It's not meant to be a fitted to the waist kind of a dress, and the more smocking you do, the more structured and stiff it's going to appear. So let me roll this onto my dowel, and while I'm doing that, I will tell you the funny story about my crazy dowel that some of you have probably already heard. So I have this very big dowel. It's going to be at least 1 inch in diameter, and the reason I have that is because back in the day when I got my first pleater, which was a Sally Stanley, it's still my favorite pleater. It came in the mail, and I opened it, and I had also ordered a little instruction manual. I'm going to just move this a little bit. And when I read it, lo and behold, I realized, well, I don't have a dowel. So I ran into my husband's workshop in the basement, and this was the first dowel I came across, and I've been using it ever since. But it turns out that it was a very good choice, and I'll show you why when I start pleating. All right, close your eyes for a minute. I don't want you to get dizzy. I have to move this over here. Okay. Now, when you pleat your fabric, you want to have those lines on the outside so that you can see them. So now I'm just putting my... Now the reason this is such a good thing, if you have a skinny dowel, you've always got this to deal with, the weight of the fabric and the dowel. I can just pull this through until it's balanced, and that way I can totally just spend my energy and my only two hands I have guiding my fabric through the pleater with this hand and turning the knob with this hand. Now I am pleating half rows. You do not need to have half rows, but since this was a size 1 and I have the half rows, I decided to use them. So we're just going to pleat this all the way across. Sorry, this is a little bit boring, but that's the way it is. You can see how nicely that heavy dowel holds my fabric. And sometimes if I use a heavy fabric, it's not, I can't even get it into the ends, so then I just don't use any dowel. I have a very good friend who always used to have her husband help her pleat. And as you can see, I don't need any help. And I also pleat toward me. A lot of people pleat away from them. I never had anyone show me how to pleat. I just kind of did it from that little manual I had. I purchased my first pleater, my Sally Stanley, from Linda's Silver Needle, which may be a familiar business to some of you, if you're old like me. I'm just going to pleat that all the way across. Let's see. And if you've done a fairly good job pleating, you should hit that next line pretty square on. Okay, we should be able to just do one more. I always find it helps to have a little tension over here, pulling it through, because that's the end that kind of wants to drag the other way. Okay, so here comes my line, and you can see that it's pretty darn even. And then you pull it through, and you're done. Now, I know somebody is going to ask me about my pleater box, so I'm going to show it to you. Oops. This is a pleater box that I bought from Dora Walters, and it's fabulous. She had a gentleman make them for her. I think I got the last one he ever made. He stopped making them, probably because they were a giant pain in the neck. But you can see I can have 24 spools on that level, and the threads come out here, and I can have 24 spools on the bottom level, and the threads come out the front. And it is fabulous. Okay, so now we're going to go back over to the table. Sorry, guys. All right, the next thing you're going to do is open this up, and you want to flatten it on the ends, and you are going to take the blunt end of a needle and pull these threads back to the closest needle hole to your line. And make sure when you pull them back that you pinch this end so you don't pull the threads out from your fabric that you want to smock. Okay, I've got one more here. And then you're going to tie your threads off. You're going to do that on both sides after you open it up to where it is comfortable for you to smock. Hold on one second here. Got a little bit of a hang up. Okay, that should do it. Okay. Now, what you don't ever want to do is tie off your top thread. Oh, I see what happened here. Hold on one second. Your top thread is your gathering thread, and you never tie that off. Okay, I just got to go back over here. All right, now, so we've pulled that out, and we're going to open this up, and you don't have to open it to a certain measurement. You have your gathering thread to help you fit it, and you can block it a bit to help you fit it onto your yoke. Just open it to a place that's comfortable to smock. All right, then you're going to do the same thing on this side, pulling your threads out to that line. But for the sake of expediency, pretend I've already done that. And I'm going to come back over to this side, and I'm going to tie off my threads and cut them. Now remember, I said we never tie off this top thread. And then I usually have cut my threads so long that I can give them another little shearing. And I tie mine in twos. And I don't take each thread and make a square knot. I take them together, make a loop, and I pull that loop down to the fabric and then pull it up. And I do that twice. And that gives you a really secure knot that is never going to slip out. It's much more secure than a double knot. Okay, let me show you that one more time. See if you can, hope you can see it okay. All right, so make a loop. And bring it down onto the fabric, put your finger on it, and then pull those up. And I do it twice. Okay, so once you get that done on both sides, you're ready to smock. I like to have my threads tied on the back, so that's how I do it. You can find your middle. You can smock whatever design you want. One of the things that I didn't mention, and I've already done it, is your seam allowance is a 1/2 inch, and we're going to pipe this seam as well. So you have to figure out where you want to start your smocking. So just be aware that this is a 1/2 inch seam at the top. Okay, so now you're ready to smock, and that's the next thing that has to happen. You're going to smock both front and back. When you get your first piece done smocking, you're going to want to pull out those smocking threads, but I would advise you to not pull out your smocking threads until you do your second piece, because you want to make sure you do whatever design you do, you want to space it exactly the same, that you start on the same line for each row as you did for the first piece. All right, I want to show you one more thing that I talked about, and that's if you use a heavier fabric. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, that you decide you want to make a dress out of corduroy, which is very suiting for our climate. I'm going to plug my phone in here. But clearly, if you did a 44-inch width of fabric, like this dress requires, it would be hugely bulky and full, and you would not be able to cram all those pleats onto the yoke. So I'm going to show you how I do it, if I can find my paper. All right. Let's say you have a yoke that's 12 inches across. All right. The way I do it, I always do it the same way every time. I take a piece of fabric that's 10 inches. This is the corduroy now. That's 10 inches plus a ½ inch on either side for seam allowance. All right. I pleat it. I tie it off. I take it out so my ½ inch is sticking out here. That's just so if I want to pin it down that I can and measure it accurately. I tie off my thread. I open it up to where it's comfortable to smock. All right. So this is kind of reasonable. Okay. I tie off my threads on the back like this, and then I measure it. So I know I started with 10 inches, and now the smocking is exactly 4 inches. So I know that 10 inches of corduroy will yield 4 inches of smocked fabric. All right. So we do a proportion. So if we know 10 inches yields 4 inches smocked, how much do I need to do 12 inches? And then it's very simple middle school math, but I'll do it out for you in case you forget. So then you have you cross multiply and divide. So we're going to cross multiply. So we have 4x equals 120. We divide both sides by 4. So this cancels out. And now you have x equals 30. So I need 30 inches of fabric to smock from here to here. Okay? If you are doing a dress that is smocked all the way out, you would have to add that before you start. So say it's another 1.5 inches on either side, 3 inches, 15 inches. So it would be 1.5 inches here, 1.5 inches here, which is 3 inches plus the 12, okay? If you're going to do it like we did Amy, we're going to smock to here, but then I still need this flat amount. You would measure from here to your seam allowance and here to the edge, not the seam allowance, to the edge of the pattern, here to the edge, and add that, but as flat fabric. You would do that afterwards. So for Amy, if this was your measurement, which this would be a huge measurement for Amy, but say this is what we're doing, you would need 30 inches plus where did that piece go? Let's do it for real. So if we go back here, and I put that right there, although that doesn't really even matter, but it gives you a better visual. This is 2 inches on either side, so I would need to add 4 inches to this measurement. This is the smocked measurement, okay, so 30 inches, and then 2 here and 2 here. So my fabric would only need to be 34 inches wide of corduroy as opposed to 44 inches wide that it calls for in a cotton or a lawn. Let's see if that makes sense to everybody. It will help you in the future if it does, and if we need to review it again next time, we can do that. So at this point, you should be ready to go ahead and cut out your blocks. get them marked first, get them marked, get them pleated, and do your smocking. I will be in touch with you regarding Zoom meetings, and we'll go from there. One of the things I wanted to mention to you is that I would prefer if you didn't cut out the rest of your jumper at this point. I want to talk to you about interfacing and piping. So we'll talk about that at our next lesson. Okay, good luck. Bye.